Welcome to the deep dive. So, if you're a first time mom, kind of finding your way through this incredible, maybe sometimes head spinning world of having a baby, you're definitely in the right place. We know this whole journey is amazing, but also comes with a whole lot of questions.
Oh, absolutely. And, to help with some of those big ones that seem to pop up in these first few months, we've really dug into quite a few different sources for you. We looked at this really interesting Reddit thread where parents were talking about 5-month-old weight. And we also explored some research looking at how those early night wakings can affect your mood, which is just so important.
Yeah, definitely.
Plus, we've got some advice from a pediatric sleep consultant, info on starting solid foods, some insights on those really exciting milestones, like when they might start trying to stand,
Hmm.
and just a general overview of what's typically happening developmentally around 5 months.
Right. So, our goal here really is to pull out the most useful, relevant bits from all of that, just so you can feel more informed, maybe a bit more confident in the choices you're making, and maybe just, breathe a little easier knowing what might be coming up. So, ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
Okay, first up, something pretty much everyone goes through teething.
Ah, yes, the teething saga. While the timing really does vary like a lot from baby to baby, most kids get that first tooth sometime between 6 and 10 months. But it's definitely not unheard of for some little ones to start showing signs earlier, maybe even around 5 months.
Okay, and what are we actually looking for? What are those early clues?
Well, you might notice their gums look a bit puffy, maybe a little redder than usual. Excessive drooling is a big one. Sometimes it really does seem like a faucet that won't turn off.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And then, just a general increase in fussiness. Maybe they seem irritable and it doesn't seem tied to being hungry or tired. That could also point towards teething.
Okay, good to know what to watch for. Now, another huge topic, one that came up a lot in that Reddit thread, is feeding. Specifically, that question of how much a 5-month-old should weigh.
Oh, yeah. It's completely understandable why that's such a common worry for parents. You see those growth charts, and it feels like there's a right answer. Generally speaking, at 5 months, the average weight for baby boys is around 16 pounds, 9 ounces, and they're maybe about 26 inches long.
Okay.
And for girls, the average is a little lower, closer to 15 pounds, 3 ounces, maybe 25 and a quarter inches long.
But those are just averages, right? I think that's so key for new moms to hear.
Absolutely. Crucial. Think of it more like a range. Every single baby has their own growth path. What your doctor really cares about is the pattern over time. Are they staying roughly on their own curve?
Mm.
But just to give you a ballpark idea for intake, a 5-month-old usually takes in about 24 to 32 ounces of breast milk or formula over a full 24 hours.
Right. And what does that look like day to day typically?
So for formula-fed babies, that often breaks down to about 6 ounces per bottle, maybe 5 or 6 bottles a day. Breastfed babies, their intake can vary a bit more each time they nurse, but generally you're probably looking at around 5 to 6 nursing sessions in that 24-hour period.
Though some might want more or maybe fewer.
Exactly. Some might nurse more often, some less. It really depends on their individual appetite and, your milk supply.
Okay. Now, creeping up around this 4 to 6 month mark is the big question. Solids. How do you know if they're ready? And, like, where do you even start?
That's a huge one, isn't it? And yeah, a lot of parents feel a bit unsure about this transition. The general thinking is that most babies start showing they're ready sometime between 4 and 6 months old.
And what are those readiness signs? What should you actually be looking for?
Okay, key things are, can they sit up pretty well? Maybe with a little support, but definitely holding their head steady. That's really important for safe swallowing. Another big one is, have they lost that tongue thrust reflex? Where they automatically push food out with their tongue. They need to be able to actually swallow it.
Right, that makes sense.
And also, do they seem interested? Like, do they lean forward and open their mouth when you offer food on a spoon?
Okay. Now, I know the pediatric guidelines like the AAP have a recommendation about breastfeeding.
They do. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends exclusive breastfeeding for about the first 6 months. There are just so many benefits for the baby's health. When you do start solids, the advice is to begin with really simple single-ingredient purees. And importantly, no added sugar or salt.
Okay.
And this is key for spotting allergies. Wait about 3 to 5 days between introducing each new food. That way, if your baby has a reaction like a rash or maybe some tummy upset, you have a much better idea what might have caused it.
That's a great tip. What about specific nutrients? Anything we should focus on when starting solids?
Yes, definitely. In that second half of the first year, so from 6 months on, their need for iron and zinc really increases. Good sources are things like pureed meats. They're actually really nutrient dense, and also those iron-fortified single-grain cereals.
Okay, let's talk about baby cereal then. How do you actually, prepare it and offer it?
Right, so the usual guidance is to mix about 1 tablespoon of that single-grain iron-fortified cereal with maybe 4 tablespoons of breast milk or formula. You want a smooth, fairly thin consistency at first. Offer it with a small baby spoon while your baby is sitting upright, usually after they've had some milk so they're not starving. And just start small, like 1 or 2 teaspoons once or twice a day.
And definitely not in a bottle, right?
Exactly. Don't put cereal or other solids in the bottle unless your doctor has specifically told you to for a medical reason. Spoon feeding is the way to go.
Got it. And then how do things progress from those first purees?
Well, usually around 8 to 10 months old, you can start moving towards finely chopped, soft finger foods. So think really well cooked, soft fruits and veggies, maybe some soft pasta, little bits of cheese, finely minced or shredded meat. You can also try things that dissolve easily, like some types of baby crackers or those puffed rice cereals.
And water, when does that come into the picture?
Good question. Once you start introducing solids, it's a good idea to offer small sips of water in a cup with meals. Before solids, they typically get all the hydration they need from breast milk or formula, but offering water with solids helps them learn to drink from a cup and just establishes good habits early on.
Okay. But what if you offer that spoonful of puree and your baby just clamps their mouth shut or turns their head away? It happens, right?
Oh, absolutely. It can feel a bit discouraging sometimes. The best thing to do is just not force it. If they're really refusing, take a break. Try again in maybe a week or so. Keep offering different tastes and textures, but try not to make meal times a battle. If the refusal keeps going on for a while, though, it's always worth checking in with your pediatrician just to make sure there's nothing else going on.
Right. Always good advice. Okay, let's shift gears to another topic that's huge for new parents.
Hmm.
Sleep. That magic phrase, sleeping through the night, and the big decision about maybe moving baby to their own room.
Ah, yes, the million-dollar questions. When we talk about a baby sleeping through the night, especially early on, it often just means a solid stretch of maybe 6 to 8 hours,
Hmm.
which honestly can feel like a miracle.
Totally.
And while waking up during the night is still super common for 5-month-olds, a lot of babies at this age do start having longer, maybe more predictable sleep stretches, which hopefully means a bit more rest for you too.
So how much sleep are we generally talking about for a 5-month-old total?
The typical range is somewhere between 12 and 16 hours of sleep in a 24-hour period,
Yeah.
and that includes their daytime naps.
Okay.
They might still be on 3 naps, or some babies might be starting that transition down to 2 longer naps around this age.
Now let's get into room sharing. The AAP recommendation is for at least the first 6 months, mainly for SID's safety. But there's also some other research to consider, isn't there?
That's right. The AAP guideline is primarily focused on reducing SID's risk, which is incredibly important. However, some research has suggested that after about 4 months, continuing to room share might actually be linked to babies getting a bit less nighttime sleep overall and waking up more often.
Interesting.
And, kind of related to that, the same research pointed towards a possible increase in unsafe sleep practices, like parents bringing the baby into their bed, perhaps, out of sheer exhaustion from being woken up frequently.
Okay, so that distinction between room sharing and bed sharing is really important here.
Absolutely critical. Room sharing means the baby has their own safe sleep space, like a bassinet or crib, just in the same room as you. Bed sharing means actually sharing the same sleep surface, which the AAP strongly advises against because of the increased safety risks.
So it sounds like for some families, maybe room sharing beyond those first few months could potentially lead to more challenges than benefits.
It really depends on the family. For some, it works great and they continue happily for much longer. But for others, yeah, if everyone's sleep is really suffering, that prolonged room sharing can lead to significant sleep deprivation for the parents. And we know that when parents are extremely tired, the risk of making choices that aren't ideal for safety just out of desperation can go up. Some studies even hint that babies room sharing after 4 months might be more likely to end up in the parent's bed sometimes, and there might be more soft bedding around.
Which can be risky.
Exactly. And beyond the immediate safety stuff, that chronic lack of sleep really does take a toll on parental mood and well-being.
So how do you actually decide when is the right time, if ever, to move the baby to their own room?
It's such a personal decision. There's no single right answer. It really varies. Some things to think about are, do you have a safe crib set up ready in their room? Has your baby physically outgrown the bassinet? Like, are they starting to sit up, push up, or hitting the weight limits?
Okay.
Also, is the room sharing itself causing major sleep disruptions for everyone involved? And maybe the biggest factor, do you, as parents, feel ready for that change? Emotionally ready?
And it's possible that making that move could actually improve sleep for everyone.
It definitely can sometimes, especially after that 4-month mark. Babies just become so much more aware of their environment. Little noises or movements you make in the night might be enough to wake them up if they're right next to you. Giving them their own quiet space can sometimes help them link those sleep cycles together better and get longer stretches.
What about sleep training? Can you do that if the baby is still in your room?
Oh, absolutely. You can definitely work on sleep training while room sharing. Fundamentally, sleep training is about helping your baby learn the skill of falling asleep independently and getting back to sleep if they wake up. While some methods might initially suggest having baby in their own room to make it easier, many approaches can totally be adapted for a room sharing setup.
And for parents thinking about it, when is that typical window experts suggest might be a good time to start?
Most sleep experts tend to point to the 4 to 6 month window as often being a good time. Developmentally, babies are usually more capable of longer sleep stretches by then. There are lots of different methods out there, from really gradual ones to more structured approaches like Ferber. The biggest thing, usually, whatever you choose, is consistency.
Hmm.
And it's also good to know about sleep regressions. Those times when a baby who was sleeping pretty well suddenly starts waking up a lot again. They often happen around developmental leaps.
So if a family decides, okay, we're ready to move the baby to their own room, any tips to make that transition a bit smoother?
Yeah, definitely. One thing is to start by having your baby take their naps in the nursery. That helps them get familiar and comfortable with the space during the daytime. Also, try to make the nursery part of your daily routine. Maybe do diaper changes there, have some playtime on the floor. Then, for a few nights before the big move, you could try doing the whole bedtime routine, bath, books, song in the nursery, but then bring them back to your room to sleep.
Kind of eases them into it.
Exactly. Or you could do it even more gradually. Maybe put the bassinet in the nursery for a few nights first, before switching to the crib.
Those are really practical ideas. Okay, let's switch focus again to those super exciting physical milestones. Like, when do babies actually start trying to stand up?
It's always so amazing to watch them figure these things out. You might have noticed that stepping reflex when they were newborns, right? Where their legs kind of walk if you hold them up.
Yeah.
But that's just a reflex. It doesn't mean they're actually ready to stand.
So, what's the typical progression then? How does it usually unfold?
Well, motor skills tend to develop from the top down. So first, they need good head control. Then strengthen their upper body, learning to roll, then sitting up on their own, and often crawling comes before standing. Around 4 or 5 months, you might notice when you hold them sitting, they push down with their legs. Or if you hold them upright, they might try to straighten their legs and stand. But that's more about strengthening those leg muscles. The extensor muscles they build during tummy time, it's not true standing yet.
So, it's important not to push them into standing before they've mastered those earlier steps, like sitting and crawling.
Absolutely. Building that core strength and the muscles needed for sitting and crawling is really the foundation. Usually by around 6 or 7 months, many babies can take some weight on their legs if you support them in a standing position. But the actual practice of standing, like pulling themselves up on furniture, that generally starts around the time they're getting good at crawling on hands and knees. So typically after 6 months.
Okay, so what are the signs then that they might be getting close to trying that pulling to stand thing?
You'll probably see a few things converging. They're likely over 6 months old. They're actively working on that hands and knees crawl. And you might start seeing them reach for low, stable furniture, trying to haul themselves up.
And how can you encourage that once they seem ready?
Oh, simple things work well. Try putting some interesting toys just out of reach on a low surface, like a sturdy coffee table or even the couch cushion. That gives them a reason to try and pull up. You can also encourage kneeling play in front of furniture. That helps build the specific leg and core strength they need for standing.
It's amazing how it all connects, isn't it? And it's not just the physical stuff happening around 5 months either.
Not at all. Developmentally, 5 months is a big time for social interaction, too. They get much more interested in people, maybe start recognizing their own name and turning when you call them. They're also starting to grasp cause and effect, like if I drop this toy, it makes a noise. Or if I make this specific cry, mom or dad usually picks me up.
It's just incredible watching all these little light bulbs go on.
It really, really is. And just like we talked about with weight and feeding and sleep, it's just so vital to remember that every single baby hits these milestones at their own unique pace.
Well, as we start to wrap up this deep dive, aimed especially at you amazing first time moms, we really hope this conversation has given you some helpful insights, maybe a bit of extra confidence navigating these early months. Remember, you really are the expert on your own baby.
Absolutely. Trust those instincts you have while also staying informed with good, reliable info. And know that it's totally normal for there to be a huge range of what's typical, whether it's weight gain, eating habits, sleep patterns, or when milestones happen. You see that reflected in the experiences other parents share too.
So, maybe a final thought to leave you with. Is there one thing from our chat today that really stuck with you? Something that resonates with where you are right now? And how might you maybe think about that or even apply it in the coming days and weeks as you keep learning and growing right alongside your little one? What other questions are maybe bubbling up for you now as you watch these amazing changes unfold?
Keep observing, keep learning, and really try to cherish these incredibly precious, fleeting early moments.